This is Project Management for You.
Hi, I'm Ben Adam Smith from the UK, and I'm a backer of the Project Management for You Kickstarter campaign. Go Caesar!
Are you a solopreneur, individual, or small business owner who struggles with ideas and lacks converting those ideas into reality?
Do you underpromise, afraid you won't deliver?
Learn the least you need to know to start your path of turning ideas into reality and delivering on your promises.
Each episode is designed to help you get things done.
Welcome to Project Management for You with Caesar Abade.
Hello everyone and welcome to the 9th episode of the Project Management for You podcast series. I am Caesar Abade, your host, and it is great to have you here. On this show, I bring you my conversations with the best project managers I know as we try to break down and explain project management to you so you can start turning your ideas into reality, delivering on your promises, and getting things done by using project management ideas and principles. As you know by now, I am also working on a book of the same title, Project Management for You, using my own experience as a project manager and also a lot of the insights I'm getting from all these interviews here on this series. So you can visit projectmanagementforyou.com to check out the crowdfunding campaign I'm running to help me with the costs of self-publishing. Campaign is going really well. I'm at 55% as I record this episode. And it is going to run until November 1st, 2014. So if you are listening to this podcast episode before November 1st, 2014, I'd really appreciate your support. So just visit projectmanagementforyou.com for more details. Now, today I bring you the fantastic Stephen Carver, and we will break down project management and explain it to you. Stephen Carver is rated consistently as one of the top lecturers at Cranfield University School of Management. Stephen has a unique ability to enthuse others and create buzz around the traditionally dull subjects of project and program management. He's an inspirationalist, a mentor, and a practitioner. Stephen has worked on projects in the oil business before moving on to work at Virgin, before working directly for a global CEO as head of project and program management strategy. He has experience of project and program management in almost all business sectors, from banks to oil, and from construction to law firms. He has lectured and consulted globally, and is highly experienced in presenting ideas in a way that bridges different cultural and organizational differences. He is an honorary fellow of the Institute of Risk Management and an honorary fellow of the Association of Project Management.
Today's special guest and project manager extraordinaire is up next.
Hello, Stephen. How are you?
Hello, Cesar. I'm feeling very good over here in England. It's the end of the summer, but the weather is still rather nice.
Nice. So you are in London, England. I'm in London, Canada. So new country in the old country.
Absolutely. Just a few hours difference.
Just a little pond away. Now, Stephen, I'm so glad that we connected just a few weeks ago through our common friend, Peter Taylor. And we had a lively conversation via Skype last week, I think. And it was fascinating to get to know you. And when you accepted my invitation to be on this podcast series, I was thrilled. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So Stephen, you are a project manager. You talk to project managers, and you've written about project management for many, many years. So in your words, how would you describe project management to the layperson?
Okay, I always say it's a profession that makes things happen. It's all about change management. The world is full of change. Some change people want, some change people don't want, but we all have to react to change. As Darwin said, it's not survival of the fittest, it's those most able to adapt to change. And we are professionals at adapting to change and taking others with us. So that's what we are.
Mm-hmm. That resonates with me because I find that we in the past, like society just moved into different plateaus. So, it'd be like we would stay the same for a while, and there'd be some technological advance which would move us to a new plateau. We'd be there for a while, and I just don't think there's a plateau anymore. It's just going to be change constantly. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. It's change on change, and also complexity has reared its ugly head. And as a result, project management is having to change fundamentally as a discipline, because a lot of the tools and techniques that certainly I was brought up on were breakdown, structure, and PERT, and all the rest of it. They're great for projects that aren't subject to great change, but nowadays, as you do projects, so they change. Perhaps I can give you an analogy of how I think about projects. Would that be cool?
Oh, of course.
Right now, Cesar, what's the last time you flew in an airplane?
That would have been a week and a half ago.
Okay, where did you go?
I went to Dallas, Texas, and back to Detroit. From Detroit to Dallas and back.
Okay, that's fine. Now, what you wanted, of course, was to be able to click your fingers and you'd be in Dallas or Detroit or wherever you wanted to be. But the actual journey itself was really quite a major, A, expense, and B, a waste of your time. Agreed?
Agreed.
So I always say my business is rather like being a pilot. Now, let me tell you about your flight. You got yourself into a thin metal tube, which has the crash resistance of a Coke can. It has no ejector seats. It has no parachutes. You paid money to sit in this can. The only safety equipment you have is a life jacket, which is particularly useful, of course, flying over land. But don't worry, they do give you a whistle for attracting attention. This lunatic at the front, called the pilot, then loaded you up full of a high explosive fuel called Jet A1 and launched you off the end of the runway and accelerated you up to about 550 miles per hour and took you up to about 35,000 feet above the surface of planet Earth. If you fully understood the situation, you're probably on a second Jack Daniels. He then managed to he or she managed to throw you down to another piece of concrete at exactly the right angle so that the plane didn't crash and burn, which is very easy to do with one of those planes, and you stepped out. So when you took that flight, what was the name of the pilot?
I have no idea.
Okay. Did you thank the pilot?
Nope.
Did you even check there was a pilot on board?
I can't say that I did.
There you go. So you had absolute trust in this person's ability to take you from where you were to where you wanted to be. And in many ways, that's the sign of a good pilot and also the sign of a good project manager. If they're good, the trip itself, the project, which no one wants, and let's just hold on that one, no one wants a project. What they all want is the benefits of the project. So the actual journey itself, the project, is a pain in the backside to everybody. And so we are in the business of trying to make that painful journey as easy and smooth as possible, because that's really what you wanted on your flight. Did you want an exciting flight?
No, I just wanted a quick and something that I could, just work in and be there soon.
Exactly. And just like a board of directors, they just want to assume that someone's running this project and then they can reap the benefits of their strategic direction once it's all delivered. What they don't want is a project manager, or can we say a pilot? Can you imagine a pilot saying, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to take off on this Boeing 737. Now, Boeing say that the 737 cannot be flown inverted for periods of more than 5 seconds. On this particular flight, I intend to prove those engineers wrong." That's not the sort of pilot you'd want, and that's certainly not the sort of project manager you want. Everyone wants a nice, smooth, predictable flight. So the first thing is, project managers basically manage change, take people from where they are to where they want to be. Mm-hmm. Now, the next thing I'd ask you is that pilot, above all other things, what should that pilot be?
Qualified.
Qualified. Excellent. So now we're into the area of qualification. And I'm not saying that there aren't natural pilots out there, and I'm not saying there aren't natural project managers out there, but I am terrified when I do post-project views, of which I do many, to find out how little experience, how little support, how little training, how little qualifications most project managers have. Now, don't get me wrong, I became a project manager by accident, the usual stuff, thrown into it and survived. But that's a very, very dangerous and very damaging way to actually get people up to speed. And so aircraft pilots, of course, have to be qualified. Again, can you imagine getting on board the plane and the pilot saying, well, this is the captain speaking. Well, when I say captain, normally I run the Costa coffee bar here, but I've always fancied doing this, and I've read the book, and it says if you push the joystick forward, the houses get bigger, and if you pull back, the houses get smaller. How hard can this be? Again, you'd be running for the emergency exit saying this man is insane. But I've often found on projects that that's exactly the case. I had one a few years ago, 400 million IT project, complete write-off. In other words, no gain whatsoever. And I had to go in and do the audit, or the bayoneting of the wounded, as they call it. And I asked the CEO why the particular project manager had been selected. And he said, we selected John because he was very senior in terms of line management. We'd had a global reorganization, and we didn't know what else to do with him. Mm-hmm. Now, what an insane way of allocating a project manager. And can you imagine that as a pilot? That's just mad. We wouldn't get on board the plane. So number one, they have to be qualified. And the next thing I'd say is that every 6 months, do you know what they do to pilots?
Refresher, like a refresher course?
Absolutely. Okay. And I'm a great believer on this with project managers as well, because we all get into bad habits, myself included. And also, when they put them on the simulators, the pilots, that is, I put a lot of my students on project management simulators for the same reason. What we aim to do is to show them how they're going to behave under stress. Because you see, all change projects are about stress, some more stressful than others, but change is a stressful thing. Now, stress can be good. We all need stress to get out of bed in the morning. But if you have too much, then basically the physiology of your body takes over and you go into basically a very low IQ state where it's almost fight and flight. And certainly on a lot of change projects I go into, which are in trouble, the number one problem I've got to deal with is fear. Because fear, uncertainty about the change, leads to aggression, or in some cases, people being too passive. In other words, just saying, just keep me out of this. I don't like what's happening. And so we have to calm people down. And on the aircraft simulator, if you ever sit in one and watch the pilots, what they do is they put the pilots under stress, video them, and then the pilot has to watch the video afterwards of what they did. And I've seen very senior captains with their heads in their hands watching this video, shaking their heads and saying, that's not me, that's not what I do. And the instructors don't sort of blame them or fire them. They say, no, it is you. It's you under stress. And you've got to realize that that's how you will behave if the stress becomes too high. So they talk about it as crew resource management nowadays and human factors. And this is an area that I'm researching in project management, because we all know how to run projects. Pick up the PIM book, pick up the APM body of knowledge. Everything is there, quite honestly. But we all know, just like a pilot, that under pressure, a lot of that common sense, a lot of those tools and techniques start to break down. Does this kind of make sense to you?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And in fact, I just posted, a couple of days ago, I posted on our Google Plus community a question along the same lines. How many of you here, when things start to get stressful, just forget best practices and just start to wing it, And you'd be surprised how many people just say, oh, yeah, that's me. It's happening right now. In fact, I'm posting here on social media right now because I can't deal with the problems that I'm facing.
Absolutely. So. And it's funny because you're absolutely right. Most people admit to it offline, but actually when they're in post, of course, that's the last thing they can admit to, right. Because they've got auditors and they've got compliance people around them. And so the stress then increases because they now have to cover up their bad stressed behaviors as well as trying to deal with the crisis. So it just spirals into oblivion fairly quickly. Right. So the main thing is when you take over a project or you run a project, you have to try and reduce the stress. Now, the tools and techniques help with that because it gives people structure, the same way as pilots have checklists. And if we look at checklists, I'm a great believer in process, but not for process sake. All pilots go through checklists before they take off. Why? Because they don't want to discover the problems when they're in the air. When they're in the air, their options are limited. And it's a bit like being a project manager. You go through all of the pain before you take off. So you plan, you schedule, you do all this stuff that no one wants to do, because no one likes planning, or very few people do. I love it. You probably love it, because we're weird. We're project managers. But most humanity absolutely despises planning. They see it as dull and boring, and why don't we just get on with the job? And of course, there's the ultimate payoff as well, because if they don't plan, they will end up in crisis management. And another one of the dirty secrets of project management is that most people enjoy a good crisis. It enables them to throw away the Pert chart, grab a mobile phone, strut around the office feeling terribly important, and play fireman for the rest of the day, which is hugely entertaining. 5 and 6 year olds do it, but it's not so good for an adult running a major IT project for a bank. And so what we're saying is, let's have methodologies and checklists that help people think about the risks before they take off. The other thing I would say is, what's the one thing that bothers pilots above all other things? Can you guess what it is?
What bothers pilots? I don't know. They're overworked, perhaps?
No, in fact, there's very tight regulation, and they always scream if they're going to be change the rules in any way, because they are aware if they work too hard, they are likely to get what the airline captains called get their itis, which is just get the plane down regardless. And there's been many plane accidents where basically they should never have landed in the conditions that they tried to, but they were under such pressure and overwork that they made fundamental errors, and it happens on projects. And in fact, that kind of ties into the answer, because the biggest problem that pilots face, the one risk they can't manage, is the weather. Now, the weather, you can't control it. You can react to it, but you can't control it. You can forecast it to a certain extent, but sometimes the forecasts aren't too accurate, or things change around you. And by weather, in a project sense, what I'm talking about there is economic climate, perhaps the client changing. These are things that will have a major impact on your project, on your flight, and you try and forecast them as much as you can, but you will have to deal with them. So I recently audited a project manager who was running a large government project, and he was expecting me to come in and look at his earned value figures, which I did later on in the day. But the first thing I said was, what's front page news today? And he looked at me blankly and said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, what's happening in the world outside your project today? And he said, I haven't got a clue. I'm working too hard on this project. And we sat down, and I explained that, quite honestly, what's happening in the world is the weather. And it could have an impact on his project. And in fact, it did. It had a severe impact on his project because it was all the trouble in the Middle East. And the guy was oblivious to what was happening in the real world, and therefore oblivious to major impact on what was a government project. So weather is vital. We have to think about the environment in which we fly our projects.
That's fantastic information, and I agree with you, and I'm sure the project manager is listening right now. They're just taking notes, because it's a perfect analogy with the airplane pilots. Stephen,
I was going to say, let's finish off the analogy a little bit, and that's the next question is, who's flying your plane between Dallas and wherever you're going? I can't remember. Was it Washington? Yeah. And of course, it's not the pilot. It's actually the autopilot.
Right.
And that's something else I like to see on projects. I like to see systems and protocols whereby the project actually runs itself. And so therefore, just like an aeroplane, you say, well, what's the point of having two pilots at the front? What's the point of having a project manager if it'll all run automatically? And of course, the answer is that you need them there for when things get deeply stressful, if things go beyond the autopilot. And the pilot, if they are, the right state of mind, in other words, relaxed, clear-headed, then they can deal with a crisis. They've already got a crisis because they can't fly the plane, then their crisis spirals out of control and they crash. And perhaps one of the greatest examples of a cool and collected pilot was Chesley B. Sullenberger III, who, of course, landed the plane on the Hudson River, New York. Do you remember that landing?
Yes.
And I was in Charlotte this week, and they've got the plane there. I hadn't realized they actually managed to get it up from the bottom of the river. So it's now actually in a museum in Charlotte, which is where it was flying to, and where US Airways are based. So it was interesting to go around there this week and look again at how calm Chesley B. Sullenberger III was when basically he lost both engines and he turned into a glider packed full of fuel over Manhattan. And he basically had 3 minutes to get the plane himself and obviously the passengers down in one piece. And his only choice in the end was to actually land it on water, which is normally fatal for a large commercial passenger plane. But again, when you see him interviewed, he's just an incredibly calm person. And one of his quotes was that the psychological impact of both engines exploding on his plane on takeoff was severe. But because he had training and because he had the right mindset, he managed to stay calm, whereas many other people around him were completely losing their rationality. He had the mental capacity to stay calm and make the right decisions, just like a good project manager.
Right, and that's when all the training pays off, because no system can land a plane safely on the water.
And you've got in one, and most projects are unique. And so this idea that the methodology is the answer, and if you apply it, everything will be okay, is a nonsense, because occasionally things will go wrong, and that's where you have to use your intuition, your judgment, and as you've already said, your experience and experience of others around you to get that project to land safely.
Okay. Now, Stephen, there are people listening right now because I made a promise to them, and the promise is that project management can help anyone. Project management principles and ideas, some techniques can help anyone who has an idea in their mind to turn that into reality. Number one, do you agree with that? And number two, in your opinion, what is the least people need to know about project management to start getting some things done?
Okay, well, number one, definitely, project management is a life skill. I think it should be taught to 6-year-olds, although most 6-year-olds are better project managers than some of the elder ones that I see in the business. Basically, the world is full of ideas, some of them good, some of them bad. And what project management does is, number one, screen out the bad ones from the good ones by asking hard questions. Will this project fly? Have we got the capability of doing it? And then, of course, making it actually happen. The world is full of dreamers with brilliant ideas, and their ideas and their plans go nowhere. Why? Because they haven't actually applied any of the principles of project management. I've done it recently to an entrepreneur. He had full of brilliant ideas, but he'd failed consistently over 5 years because he didn't have the discipline to actually make those ideas happen. And that's what project managers bring to the world. They say, brilliant idea, let's make this one actually happen. A half-finished project is worth nothing. In fact, it's worth less than nothing because you spent all this money and time. And of course, then mentally, you think, well, projects fail. And as we know from the statistics, about 70% of projects fail, which is a hell of a lot of good ideas wasted. So yes, project management, everyone should use it. It's a basic tool for life.
Mm-hmm. So what are the stages of taking that idea? Let's say that entrepreneur had an idea for a service or for a product. In your opinion, what are the stages of taking that idea out of their brain and turning it into something they can sell?
Okay, again, we'll use the flight analogy. The entrepreneur, the person that comes up with an idea, falls in love with the idea, and quite right too. Someone's got to have a passion for this idea. They can see what it's going to be like. The destination is going to be beautiful. It's going to help the world. It's going to make them millions of bucks, whatever they're into. But because of that, often they want to rush towards it instead of actually staying on the ground and saying, hey, to make this happen, it's like a flight. Perhaps we need to do some checklists. Perhaps we need a professional project manager. And so, hey, it's all common sense, as all project management is. But, think, plan, do, reflect. All methodologies can be boiled basically down to those 4 stages. And yes, there is iteration, especially if you're going to go agile or whatever. But the most important one is the thinking phase. Sitting down and really thinking hard. Is this a good idea? Is it going to be something that we can actually make happen instead of a failed dream? Failed dreams are awful things. So you think about who your stakeholders are, you think about your objectives, you think about what could go wrong and what's your safety net. Once you've gone through that, and that's really a tough phase because everyone wants to get on with the next phase. Well, actually they don't, but they just want to get through it. And the next phase, of course, being planning. And as we said, most people don't like to plan because then failure comes as a complete surprise. Whereas if you have planned, the failure is often preceded by a long period of despair and worry. I always say, I'm in the despair and worry business, but I'd sooner think that way than be in the mindless optimism box. So the next phase is planning. As I said, most people don't want to do it, but we then do that one. So you've done the thinking, now you've done the planning. Finally, you can go into the doing. And yes, there will be iterations. There always are. And you have to go back perhaps into thinking and planning. And then a phase that a lot of people, again, don't do. I go around a lot of corporations and they say our project failure rate's too high and it's never come down. And one of the first things I say is, well, have you learned from your mistakes? And they say, oh, definitely. And I say, well, how? And they say, well, of course we learn. And I said, show me how you learned. And often they haven't learned at all. What happened was the project was badly planned. It crashed. No one did an air crash investigation afterwards. They just blamed a few people and then mindlessly carried on with a new project. And so projects is all about learning at the end. And people hate them. Post-project reviews, what a waste of time. It all went wrong. Let's get on with the next one. But just like the pilot analogy, the reason why we do aircraft crash investigations is not to blame people. That's the last thing we want to do. We do it so that more pilots won't go down with the same problem in the future. And so have you got a culture in your organizations whereby people say, hey, that one went well, let's celebrate success, but also learn what went well and were we lucky, or can we repeat the success elsewhere? And if it went wrong, and most projects go wrong, so kind of get used to it, as they say, what went wrong, how can we make sure that that doesn't happen next time? And to do that in a supportive way as opposed to an accusative way, which is, hey, who are we going to blame? The project manager. Because once that culture goes out of, hey, if you have a failed project, we're going to blame you, then of course no one in their right minds will ever want to run a project because the risks are too high. Statistically, a 70% failure rate means a 70% chance you're going to get blamed, which means you're probably going to get fired. So who would want to be a change manager in that type of organization? Having said that, I do work for a company recently whose project culture is appalling. They fire anyone that makes a mistake. And the project managers they have are pilots, but I describe them to the CEO as some of the best kamikaze pilots I've ever met in my life, because that's the only way their projects are going to go. They're just going to crash and burn.
It's funny. Now, okay, so the think, plan, do, and reflect. Each one of those 4 items there, you can talk about them, each one of them for, you can have entire courses on each one of them. Oh, yeah. And there are many, many tools, techniques, methodologies, and approaches to each of them. If you could recommend one of these techniques from the project management world to the listener right now who is not in the industry, but they're struggling with getting that idea out of their minds and into something real, do you have one technique or one tip, something that they can start applying right now that would start helping them?
Yep, absolutely. Now, I will give it, first of all, its technical term, but hey, tell people not to panic on this one because you can ignore the fancy words. But the thing is called a work breakdown structure. Now, hey, that sounds fancy. What it is basically what the goodness are you trying to do here? What is the scope? That's what we call it in technical terms. And a work breakdown structure is basically a way of breaking down a project so that everyone can understand what the scope is involved. Now, how do you do it? You don't have to read anything about work breakdown structures. You don't need to have a computer. What you will find useful is some Post-it notes and a whole bunch of people who are going to be involved in the projects, be it your family, be it your friends, be it your colleagues at work, and just get the Post-it notes out and say, okay, this is what I think the project's all about. Now, let's try and break it down further and further. Some people do it using lists. I prefer work breakdown structures. It's easier to kind of do. And you start covering a big whiteboard with everything that needs to be done. Now, you try and granulate it so that the tasks get smaller as you go down. But it's got nothing to do with who's going to do it. It's got nothing to do with how much it's going to cost. It's got nothing to do with when you're going to do it. All it's got to do with at this stage is what are we trying to achieve? Let's try and come to a common understanding of what this project is all about. Now, I've done this again recently with a big insurance company. The project was halfway through. It was out of control. They were throwing all the consultants and all the tools and techniques at it. And I said, hang on a minute, before we do any more of this, let's all sit down with a pack of Post-it notes and figure out what we're trying to achieve. And they all said, what a waste of time. And we're senior people. We don't play with Post-it notes. But I said, well, what have you got to lose? You've already lost 5 million and Post-it notes are cheap. So we got a pack of Post-it notes out. And some people were drumming their fingers on the table saying, this guy's just bizarre. Let's have a look at the earned value figures. And I said, we'll do all that later. Let's get the Post-it notes out and let's agree what we're all trying to achieve here. Now, very reluctantly, people started filling out Post-it notes, slinging on the whiteboard. And within 5 minutes, a huge row had broken up in that room. It was spectacular. And I loved it. I just sat back in my chair and tried not to laugh. Because for the next half hour, they all argued as to what the scope of the project was all about. And after they'd all sort of vented their spleen and I calmed them down, I said, well, that's why the project's out of control. No one's got a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So we did a proper WBS, again, using the team. It took us about 4 or 5 hours. A lot of excitement in the room, a lot of buzz, because you had to kind of get that energy and do it in a positive way. And everyone said the same at the end, was that basically no one had a full understanding of what the project was all about, and that the project was much, much, much bigger than any one individual had conceived it to be. Now, they all got slightly depressed at that stage and said, my God, we're already in trouble. And now we realize there's probably 4 or 5 times more scope to this project than we even thought about. And I said, no, that's a good thing. Because now, instead of just wrestling with demons in the dark, now we can actually decide what we are going to do and also what we're not going to do. So what do we need in the first phase rollout of this project? Do we need for our customers? And once we asked it in that way, they said, well, we need that chunk of work there, we need that chunk of work there. That other piece over there, perhaps that could wait until, possibly next year we'll roll it out as phase 2. So what we did was we then broke the project down, not just in terms of scope, but also in terms of phase. In other words, how we were going to do what we found to do. And it calmed everyone down. Everyone could see what everybody else's contribution was and how it fitted in with their contribution. And once you've got calm people, it's like having a calm pilot. And once you've got some priorities to what you're doing, then everyone can say, hey, I now fully understand this and I can do it. I can participate and I want it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Every time somebody answers the WBS or the work breakdown structure to that question, I do a little happy dance.
Yeah, please. I'm exactly the same.
Because I agree. It's just adds so much clarity. It helps with the most important decision in my mind, which is maybe we shouldn't do this. This is too complex for now. We don't have the time, or we won't have the resources. It just helps in so many ways to have that all those deliverables laid out, everything that we're going to have to deliver in order to complete this. That is, I can't imagine not having that when you're tackling something complex.
I know. And if you've got it up there on a whiteboard, people feel as if it's their project for the first time because they've created the scope, as opposed to the great project manager wandering down and slapping a whole pile of workbooks in front of them.
Right.
And also, you can then say to people, okay, which of these tasks do you think are your job? And that, again, causes great debate, because usually you'll end up with a whole pile of tasks that people think that was everybody else's task to do. And these are the killer tasks, the ones that people forget to do or don't think it's their job to do, and then ultimately bring the whole project down. They're what I call osintots. Have you ever heard this lovely expression?
No.
Okay, a few years ago, I was working for Halliburton, and I was promoted up to a full-time project manager, and I had to go and see the head of projects. There's an American guy, real character, typical Texan, feet on the table, the rest of it. And he said, well, boy, he said, what is your job now that you're a project manager for the Halliburton organization? And I said, my job is to deliver projects on time, on budget, to client satisfaction. And he looked me in the eye, very Texan, very rude, and he said, bullshit. And I was a bit surprised by that, him being head of projects. And I said, well, I'm sorry, what is my job? He said, your job, boy, is to kill arson-tarts. And it was one of those moments in your life you think, hey, I got a master's degree in project management. I must have missed the lecture. Earned value I got, earned schedule I got, arson-tarts, oh God, I've missed the lecture. So basically, being a typical Brit uptight, I just sort of sat there and nodded my head. And he said, okay, Stevie, what sort of arson-tart are you going to kill? And I just looked at him blankly and I said, big ones. It was just a guess. And he said, hell, boy, we don't want you killing big arson-tarts. We want you to kill little baby arson-tarts. And I said, right. And again, I should have said, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. But I sat there thinking, oh no, I missed the lecture. And he said, okay, Stevie, what do you kill these little baby arson tarts with? And I thought, God, this man's a psychopath. I got, no, what's this killing of baby Ossentots? And so I said, well, I don't know, a gun. He said, okay, what sort of gun are you going to use? So I looked on his wall, which had lots of pictures of guns, and I said, an AK-47. He said, hell, boy, we don't want lead flying all over the goddamn project. I want you to use a high-velocity hunting rifle with dum-dum bullets. And you see that little baby Ossentot just come out of his mummy's tummy. You line up the telescopic sights, you gently squeeze that trigger, and you blow its goddamn brains out. I thought, this man is obviously completely mad. And he said, now, do you understand your mission? And I said, well, apparently it's to find baby Ossentots and blow their brains out. And he said, you got it, boy. And if I ever find a grown-up Ossentot staggering around on one of your projects, I'll shoot you. So anyway, I left his office thinking, I've got no idea what that conversation was about. So I went to see one of the old hands and said, I've just been to see the head of projects. And he told me I'm an Ossentot hunter. He said, damn right you are. We all are here. And I said, sorry, please forgive me. What on earth are you all talking about? He said, Ossentots. And it stands for, oh shit, I never thought of that. Ossentot. And it all suddenly made sense, because that's what the WBS does. Basically, it shoots all your little baby Ossentots when they're born on Post-it notes. Now, Ossentots are always born, but of course, if you don't see that they're born, you can't shoot them. And so what happens is they grow. And, of course, in a badly run project, these baby Ossentots grow very fast indeed. You don't see them. And then one day, you can't kill them. They're so big, they kill you.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna remember that if I'm ever... Very cool. That's a great story, Stephen. Now, speaking of people, you just described an interesting interaction there with someone that was going to be working with you, I guess. So, as a project manager, when you're trying to get something done, often you're going to have to work with people. I mean, I'd say pretty much every single time. Even if you are, let's say, a solopreneur, at the very least, you're going to have to interact with customers, right? Absolutely, and stakeholders. Stakeholders. So what is the best way that you know, and but let's talk about delegation for a second, the Post-it notes. How do you know, okay, this is something that I need to delegate and to whom, and how to encourage people to collaborate on a project? Sure thing. Well, first of all, as I said, you've got to realize that most people will either be hugely over-optimistic about the project or, in some cases, hugely frightened. So I use a technique which is fairly standard stuff called situational leadership. Do you know about it? I've heard the term, but okay, that's about it. Let me do a mini lecture, and this is a real mini lecture. Mm-hmm. But basically, lots of research been done on how you delegate tasks to people. And one of the best models I've ever seen is called situational leadership. Hersey Blanchard actually sell it as a product, and you could do a little psychometric test on yourself to find out how good you are at various types. And what they found was that there are 4 generic styles of delegating work: S1, S2, S3, and S4. Now, we'll just quickly go through them. S1 delegation is where you sit someone down and say, in the nicest possible way, do not give me any back chat. This is what I want you to do, and this is the procedure that you must use to do this work. If you do not use this procedure, then I'm afraid you will be removed from the task. This is the task, this is the procedure, this is exactly what you must do. We will train you up with whatever tools and techniques are needed. You must do this task in this way. So that's S1. S2 is slightly different. S2 is where you say, look, here's a task. I'd like to work with you on this one because I don't think you've quite got the skills totally nailed to do it all. And so we'll kind of team up. And I've done it before, so I'll share my experience with you. And I'll be looking over your shoulder, and any problems you've got, we can sort them out. So that's S2. So S1 is basically just sit down, shut up, do it according to the checklist, no arguments. S2, ask questions, but I've got a lot of experience in this. I'm going to try and get you up to speed, or perhaps with the more complex tasks that need to be done. S3 is when you've got people up to a level of competence whereby you now feel safe to let them get on with it. And so an S3 task, you say, brilliant, you've done this sort of thing before, you know what needs to be done. Any problems,
do give me a call, and mean that. So a daily checkup or weekly checkup or even a monthly checkup in some S3 tasks. And an S4 task is, hey, you're just as good at doing this as I am, possibly even better. Please, just get on with it. And if you got any problems, let me know. But I doubt if you would. Off you go and run the South American operation for 2 years and give me monthly reports. So once you've got those 4 levels of sort of leadership style, you then have to decide for the individual in terms of their competence and also their confidence to do the task. So let me quickly explain. Because you might have a friend who you think is really, really good at doing a particular task. And so you might say, right, well, hey, Jeff, this is the task. I know you've done it a million times before. Here it is. I don't need to get involved in the detail. Off you go and do it. So that'll be an S3 or S4 type of delegation. But the same guy might actually have another task that you're about to give him. And you look at the task and think, actually, he's never, ever done anything like that before. This is a highly critical task. And you sit down and say, Jeff, the last task I gave you, we did it S3, S4. This one, I'm afraid I'm going to have to do S1 with you because you've never done it before. It's highly critical. So I want to just sit down and in the nicest possible way, will you sit down, shut up and listen to what I've got to say and how you're going to do it? Because this particular task you haven't done before and you haven't got the capability to do it. So I've got to make sure you follow the book. Now, what we're trying to do, of course, is get many things into S4 as we possibly can as quickly as possible. That means delegating everything in the end, which then, of course, gives you time as a project manager to look ahead. But we'll come back to that one later. Now, let me give you an example. I had a project a couple of years ago. I had a task, and I thought the guy knew what he was doing and was highly motivated to do it. So I kind of shoved off an email and I thought he'd just pick it up S4. When I saw the results of what he was starting to do, I thought, I've got this horribly wrong. I've mixed the person with the task. Just because he's a good guy at doing other things doesn't mean he's good at doing this. So I phoned him up and said, look, I'm not really happy about the way you're going about this. Now, initially, obviously, he's very sensitive and he got a bit upset and said, well, just trust me. And I said, it's not a question of trust in this case. It's just that I shouldn't have given you this task in this form. It's too much. Now, can I come over and we'll have a look at how you're doing it? So I went from S4 into S3. I sat down with him. And when I looked at what he was doing, it really was a car crash. He didn't think it was, but I could see it was going to end up badly. Now, I realized still didn't have the tools and techniques or the mental attitude towards this task. So then I said, well, look, hang on a minute. I'll cancel the rest of my meetings for the day. I will now sit down with you and we'll go through this together in great detail because I've done this many times and I'll show you how I do it. Now, this particular individual was a fairly interesting type and he really disliked the fact that I was so-called interfering, which I wasn't. I was trying to get him back onto the main track. And he got a little bit angry with me. And in the end, I had to say, now, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go S1 on this one. This is how we do this in this organization. These are the methodologies and processes that you will apply. No exceptions, no nothing. Now, let's sit down and do it together. And if we need more training, I'll get it for you. And then a week later, we moved into S2. I made sure that I was around when he was making the major decisions. And then within 2 weeks, he was up to S3. And within 3 weeks, that whole thing, I could just give him S4 and it's off my radar. And that's great. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yes, it does. I never heard it put it that way, but it's like a roadmap on how to deal with not only your comfort levels of of delegation, but also with the people that you're going to be working with and what they're capable of, and not only that, but have them move up that ladder of from S1 to S4. I mean, that's good for everyone, isn't it?
Oh, it is. As more you can get into S4, the more you've got, if you like, your autopilot, because it will all be done automatically. And as a result, just like the pilot, you sit there on the flight deck with nothing to do. But of course, now what it does is it gives you the opportunity to think about everything that could happen. I was on a flight deck with a pilot, fun enough, 2 days ago, and I said, are you on this flight deck at the moment, mentally? And he said, physically I'm on this flight deck, mentally I'm not. And I said, is that a bad thing or a good thing? He said, it's a good thing. He said, my mind is currently 100 nautical miles in front of the nose of this aircraft, and long may it remain there. He said, if my mind has to be in real time in this cockpit, he said, normally we have a problem and that's bad. And I thought, well, that's a wonderful distillation. He was thinking about everything that could possibly go wrong 100 miles ahead and dealing with it in his mind, such that if it did go wrong, it wasn't going to be a crisis. And I thought that's how most project managers should be. Now, I'm not saying they got their feet on their desk, doing the crossword, but I am saying that their state of mind should always be into the future. And again, I'm not exaggerating. I reckon 80% of the project managers that I come across, their minds are actually not even in the future. They're in last week. They're reviewing what people did last week. Now, of course, you have to have a review of what you've done last week, but you can't manage the past. You can only manage the future. And if you're only looking to the past in the way of you're controlling your project, it's like a pilot sitting, with his back to the windows and to the controls. It's just the wrong orientation.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote by Wayne Gretzky, a very famous Canadian hockey player, that he said, "The secret is to be where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is."
Absolutely, beautifully put. I'll use that in my lectures. Thank you.
It's not mine, but it's Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player of all time.
Wonderful. And perhaps because we're getting to the end, I know, of the interview, and we have to be careful of time. The attention span of your listeners won't be that high. So possibly we could talk about endings, because rather like a flight, you didn't really want the flight. It's an inconvenience. You didn't really want the project. It's an inconvenience. But you want the benefits of landing and then doing what you wanted to do. And as any pilot will tell you, any idiot can be taught how to take off in a plane. In fact, I spoke to one pilot and he said, I could teach you how to fly this A320 off this runway in less than 10 minutes safely. I said, really? He said, really? He said, we can train monkeys to do this. He said, I don't get paid for takeoffs. I get paid for landings. And if the number of landings equals the number of takeoffs, I'm a good pilot. And so landing a project, delivering a project on time, on budget, smoothly at the right airport without everyone screaming hysterically in the back is really what it's about. And so it's all about landing them gently, delivering, and then getting used to the idea that no one's really going to thank you because you made it look so easy.
Beautiful. Now, Stephen, I think I'm going to have you back on the show, if that's okay with you, because you have so much to share, and I feel like we just scratched the surface here. But if you have a final thought for the listener here who maybe, let's say they're either a project manager who's starting or someone who just found the show because they have that idea that they want to turn into reality, that promise they made to their families or to their client base, that they want to deliver on that promise. What is your one thought that you have for them before we go?
I think stay calm, realize that most of the people you're going to be dealing with are stressed, get professionals in or get professional advice, and do it, because the world needs good change and the world needs good project managers to change the world.
Beautifully said. Stephen, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, where should they go?
Type my name into YouTube. You can see a whole bunch of illicit videos, which I never gave permission to be done. But you can see me doing various lectures, which I don't mind. And also, of course, I'm available at Cranfield University, where I teach the MBAs. Fantastic.
And I'll have a link to those videos, some of those videos at least, in the show notes for this episode. Stephen Carver, thank you so much. It's great to have you on the show, and you will be hearing back from me.
Well done, and a great show. Keep up the good work.
Project Management for You, breaking down project management and supplying you with tips, advice, and simple steps to turn your ideas into reality. Learn more at projectmanagementforyou.com.
All right. I hope you enjoyed my conversation there with Stephen. I have to say, I'm really super impressed with Stephen Carver. We just met briefly before this interview. We had another call just to discuss, the angle and things like that. And it was just a lovely time. He is one of those people that make you really feel comfortable and really interested in what you have to say. It's just a delightful experience to getting to know Stephen Carver and bringing him onto the show here. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that his insights and the resources that he mentions are useful to you. Now, if you enjoy what you're hearing here, and would you like maybe a step-by-step approach to using project management to start turning your ideas into reality, delivering on your promises, and getting things done, head on over to projectmanagementforyou.com and consider backing this book project of mine. If you're listening to this episode right now during the month of October, before November 1st, 2014, please consider going to projectmanagementforyou.com and becoming a backer of this project. And you will get, there's all sorts of different rewards that you get by backing this project. There's a level for the ebook. There's another level of backing that you get a signed hardcover copy of the book. And there are different levels as well. And you can learn more by going to that URL. There's also a video that I created that is a bit unusual, and in the settings that I chose, and the background that I chose to film it. So I'm not going to say any more than that. You have to go to projectmanagementforyou.com to watch it. So that's what I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, and I will talk to you next time. And until then, remember that life is a project and you are the manager. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you for listening.
Tune in next time for more inspiring interviews and key information to help you get things done.
Want to learn more? Go to projectmanagementforyou.com and order Caesar's book, Project Management for You.
Your path of turning ideas into reality starts now.